You're listening to Two Bobs, conversations on the art of creative entrepreneurship with David C. Baker and Blair Enns.
Blair, today I am going to interview you on something, but let me introduce this a little bit to our audience. So if you've been listening for a while, you probably noticed that we alternate. We don't always publish them in the right order, but when we record them, we alternate. So I'll come up with a topic and Blair will then interview me on it and throw some of his thoughts in, and then we reverse that. So today, I am going to be interviewing Blair on the 4 regrets that you might have. And if this goes well, Blair, I'm really hoping that this furthers your career as a motivational speaker because this topic is so motivational, the 4 regrets you might have. Is this the best you could do?
So I live in a little village in the mountains in the middle of nowhere. People here don't understand what I do. So the big question I get is, I hear you're a motivational speaker. Right. And my reply is, no, I'm more of a demotivational speaker. Right. So yeah, this is right in line with that.
Now, this one interested me, whether I should or I shouldn't. I always read your blog and emails. And this one was a recent one, and I was really glad when you suggested that we talk about this one because I, too, thought it would be a fantastic candidate for this. But it's not just because of the time that we're living in. This is the second quarter of 2020, but it's an evergreen topic because you see this all the time, right, in our own personal lives, in the lives of our clients, and in their business lives, how they might have certain regrets. And I got to tell you, before I turn you loose here, I wrote this Twitter post that I think got more leverage than anything else I've written the last year, and it was about not being too hard on yourself because you suddenly think you have all this time to do more things. What you're saying, in essence, is you don't necessarily have more time, but this would be the perfect opportunity to prioritize some things. What kind of introduction do you want to give to this before I interview you on these 4 things?
Thanks for that. Well, I think regrets are actually something that I've thought about quite a bit. Insert your joke here.
Yeah, you have no idea how difficult it is to just shut up.
Let's just skip over this part, shall we? Probably because I don't allow myself many, and it's probably a character flaw. I'm probably fragile in some way, but I've long believed that regrets are for the things that you don't do. So I do allow myself regrets over action that I did not take, but I don't assign too much regret to things that I did because I think action yields information. You do something, you learn, okay, that wasn't the right thing to do. There's a lesson there, you move on. There's almost never a lesson in not taking action. And that's part of the regret. So I think regret is saved for the things that you don't do. And I think when we're through this COVID pandemic and we're back to whatever normal is, and so business is humming, people are gathering, people are traveling. That's what I mean by normal. I don't necessarily mean the old normal. But when we're back to whatever normal is, I think we're going to look back at the time that we did have off. And not that, I'm so busy right now, I don't feel like I've got a lot of extra time, but I've heard a lot of people say to me they've got time right now. Somebody said it to me again yesterday. Lots of time in my hands. I think we're going to look back with regrets on the things that we didn't do. You have 2 kids, I have 4 kids. It's been a while ago since our kids were young, but when you have your first child, you have this reaction, which is like, oh my God, what did I do with all my free time back when I didn't have kids? Do you remember that?
Yeah, I do. And part of it is you're busy taking pictures and doing things with them. And, by the 4th one, you're not taking any pictures of them unless a neighbor did or something. So you just completely change your life, that first one.
Yeah, the first one you think, oh my God, back when I didn't have kids, I had all this free time. Then you have your second kid and you look back and you think, man, what did I do with all my free time when I only had 1 kid? Mm-hmm. And then it kind of changes after, it just gets blurry after 2. And I think that's what we're going to look back at. We're going to look back and think, oh, I could have done some things. I should have done some things, and I didn't.
Here we are getting ready to talk about these 4 things, and I'm thinking about a call I had on the way here, talking with a PhD researcher from Toronto, wanting to devise a completely new product that I would use for my clients and my prospects. And I was so excited after that phone call, not even knowing how much this is going to cost, thinking about how this is not something I typically would have thought about before. So anyway, I love this topic. Let's dive into it. There are four. The first one that you talked about, here we are on the busiest Friday both of us have had in a long time. And the first future regret you're trying to avoid, hopefully, is I should have taken more time off. Why is it that people aren't taking, and you're not talking about traveling because sometimes they can't travel, but why aren't they taking more time off, and what might keep them from doing that?
We're always on. I think many of us are still in crisis mode. I feel like emotionally I'm through crisis mode. I can tell by my alcohol consumption.
It's back down to normal?
Yeah, it's back down to nothing.
Right.
I don't believe that everybody is through crisis mode, but I think when we're in crisis mode, or even the uncertainty has us on edge. So even if we're not busy, we're always on. We're looking for the next signal, the signal that everything's going to be okay, or that we're about to head off over the cliff edge. And I think even if you're not actually doing a lot, you're always mentally on. You get up in the morning, you're checking your email and communications, waiting for something to drop. I'm making generalizations here about how busy people are and acknowledging that some people are actually quite busy. But I think for the majority, you have more time on your hands than you did 2.5 months ago. And I think the reason we're not taking time off is just like we're waiting. We're in constant expectation mode. And the three regrets we'll talk about, as I mentioned in my article, for you to not have those other three future regrets, you need to be in a pretty good mental health space today to make decisions. And I see a lot of people who are stressed. And I'm not saying that time off is the answer, because for a lot of people, you can't go anywhere. But not going somewhere and not working or thinking deeply about work, those are two different things. You can have a staycation. You can unplug electronically, even if it's just a series of long weekends, 3 or 4 day weekends, if you don't feel like you have the ability to take a week off. But I think that's the first thing that we're going to regret, is that we didn't take time off.
There's this weird thing happening, especially with firms that weren't working remotely before this happened. They had to dive in, and they've made some weird decisions to account for the fact that this is new and to cover that up. One of the things that they're doing is they're spending way too much time on the video side of Zoom, which requires a different level of energy. It sucks more out of you than just being on the phone sometimes. And then, of course, there's also the element of working from home, and maybe you have a spouse there, maybe you have dependents there. And all this is wearing you out to a different degree, and you aren't able to leave home as much as normal. I would guess you don't get much argument about this from our listeners, but they probably want to know, how do I pitch this to my team and still not violate this sense that we're all in this together? Maybe the idea is that we need to be facilitating more time off for our team as well, not just for ourselves.
I agree with that completely. I think it's not just about you. It is just about your team. Your team's going through the same kind of shock. And again, we're through the shock, but on edge, not sure about the future of their role. There are the stresses of working from home. I realized recently that, I've got a bunch of kids at home, but they're all adults for the most part. So I quit parenting years ago. They're just roommates for the most part. And I realized that I haven't properly acknowledged or even understood the complexities that team members face who are working from home, even though some of them work from home every day. But now their kids are at home, and their kids are young and school age, and the complications in their life, because that hasn't been a complication in mine. I've been really slow to acknowledge that. And I'll say I'm the only one at Win Without Pitching working today. Everybody else is off today. So we're trying to do that, where I'm trying to encourage people to take time off, and I'm trying to take time off, although I'm not doing such a great job. I said to somebody on a podcast earlier, I said, I worked 3 12-hour days last weekend. And then I stopped and realized, oh yeah, there are only 2 days in a weekend. Time isn't real anymore, is it?
Right.
Time is so funny right now.
One of the things that I really liked in this section in the article was you said, you're waiting for the big shift of when things snap back to normal, but the big shift is likely to be slow and still far away. And so that was part A to me. And part B was, oh, I get it. What he's saying is we need to be working in a way that is sustainable into the indefinite future. So we can't be trying to sustain a certain energy level like holding our breath, knowing that we're going to have to surface at some point. No, assuming this is the way it is into the indefinite future, are you on a sustainable pace?
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And I think I've said previously that we're making decisions in our business based on the assumption that I'm not traveling anywhere for 18 months.
Right.
If you're suspending or putting off taking time off now, is that sustainable for 18 months? What are you going to do when things get back to normal and you're busy again? Are you all of a sudden going to take time off? No, you're not, right? If you don't take it now, you're not going to get it for a while.
Yeah. Okay, this is such a great point. You said a minute ago that the other three are predicated on doing this first one about taking time off. They're predicated on managing that well, because it's going to be difficult to do these next three. So number 2 on the list, the future regret we're trying to avoid, is I should have produced some content or built my audience in some way. So all under the lead generation umbrella. Why is this important enough to make your list of the top 4?
Well, I think you and I know so many agency principals, David, who have a plan to write that book one day. And the number one reason they're not writing it today is I just don't have the time today. But at some point, I'm going to find the time. I'm going to take a long vacation or sabbatical or drop some other responsibilities and fit it into my schedule. So I'm enjoying being provocative and saying to those people, and I know a lot of them are listening, yeah, if it didn't happen during the pandemic, if you didn't get started or make significant progress, it ain't happening. So just accept that that dream is dead.
Here's the motivational speaker coming out. I got an email from a client of mine. He finished up his book and he's now shopping the best method to publish it, promote it. And I'm just so proud of him. It's like, wow, it's 128,000 words. He started it a while ago, but he's put so much work into it during this time. So, and it's not just a book. It could be a regular cadence of blog or insight pieces, or it might be your career as a podcast guest or as a podcast host. Whatever it is that you're doing to build your audience, whether it's a book or not, is the kind of thing that you don't want people to look back on this time and regret that they didn't do more of it.
Yeah. In my business, it's our YouTube channel. I approved this at the beginning of the year. My team's been pushing me for a while. And I said, okay, fine, we're going to do it. I'm the bottleneck in everything in my business. It's like, yeah, I don't have time. I don't have time. Well, out of excuses. So it's happening at some point, and it's going to be a shit show in the early days, but it's happening. Yeah. So it's not just the book, it's all forms of content. And if you've lost clients, like if your client roster's been decimated or a bunch of clients have put stuff on hold and you can't do anything for your clients, now is a really great time to channel that energy into helping even more. So rather than helping the 10 or 20 clients that you have, try to help hundreds or thousands by getting some content out there that's valuable today, that's in your area of expertise, that builds your reputation, that builds your audience. It's a great time. If it's not a revenue generating time right now, it's a great time to be audience generating.
Right. And if you want to pursue this as a listener, you could also search through some of the previous episodes. One of them we talked about this in was the Drop and Give Me 21 as well. I love this one, and it's really near and dear to my heart. It helps people mentally as well. So when they feel like there's too much fog in the future, they feel like they don't have as much control over their business, one of the ways to deal with that is to be doing the right things. And then at night, you're lying in bed and you still don't see things any more clearly, but there is a sense of satisfaction that you've done what you could. And this is a wonderful part of doing what you could.
You're listening to Two Bobs, conversations on the art of creative entrepreneurship. Your hosts are David C. Baker, author, speaker, and advisor to owners of expert firms, and Blair Enns of Win Without Pitching, the sales training and coaching program for creative entrepreneurs. For more information, go to twobobs.com. If you find this podcast helpful, please help us by telling a friend and rating us on iTunes. Thank you. Now back to David and Blair.
You ready for number 3?
Yep.
All right. I should have upgraded my own or my team's skill set. This one surprised me a little bit. So talk about, maybe at some point, if you could give us some examples of what they might do as well.
Well, I'm glad you asked, David, because I own a training company.
Oh, shoot. I didn't mean to. Right.
This is a little bit self-serving, but we just launched a pricing creativity bootcamp. There's 20 participants from all around the world. We had the orientation not too long ago. People are introducing themselves, and I've asked them to speak a little bit about, what's your situation with COVID? And of course, just like you're hearing, there's just a range of circumstances that people are dealing with. Some firms are thriving and winning new business, and some firms at the other end of the spectrum, their client base is like frozen or dried up. I'm always surprised at the number of firms that aren't experiencing like total gridlock, but there are firms out there like that. I heard from a few in this last group who said, yeah, you know what? Our clients aren't active at all right now. I've got time on my hands. So I thought now's a good time to invest in training. So one point of view, the point of view of somebody who owns a training company is you should invest in training at this point in time. Another point of view, the point of view of somebody who wants to conserve cash is I'm not investing in paid training at this time. And to those people, I would say the principle stands. If you're willing to work for it, to go look for it and find it, there is so much free online training out there in the form of just YouTube videos or inexpensive online courses. I mean, more inexpensive. Ours start at $2,000. So there are $49 courses out there, depending on what skill sets you want to upgrade. Like, is it project management? Is it knowledge about your clients' domains or areas of expertise or vertical markets? Is it winning new business? Is it negotiating? Pick a skill set that you want to improve. And then you can take this on an individual basis. You could reach out to your people and say, hey, we've got some time. You're still on payroll. You're not all that busy. Let's take advantage of this to improve your skill sets and then allocate a budget. And if the budget has to be zero, that's fine. Have it be zero and just say to your people, can you let me know what one or two skills you think it makes sense for you to try to upgrade over the next few weeks? And then can you give me your recommendation? Go find the courses, go find the curriculum online, even if it's just videos or blog posts or whatever. Have your people put together a bit of a professional development plan over a short period of time, over the next couple of months, and assign a budget to that, even if the budget is zero.
Yeah. There's so much to think about there. I couldn't help but think about, in that vein, something that you and I have talked about. I remember it was one of the more emotionally charged episodes where we stopped a little bit, actually, and asked each other what it was that motivated each of us. And one of the things that both of us felt the same about was central, must be this idea that you're constantly learning. Because a skeptic could step back and ask, well, why? What's the role of upgrading our team's skill set, for instance? Well, how is that going to translate into more pricing or whatever? It's not always about higher pricing. It's about just remaining interested as a human. And also, if we translate this to your team, it's about making your firm a different place to work, where the people who come to you, they come to you because your firm has the reputation as a place that builds careers. You draft a player and you then know how to coach them up. So I can see how this would expand as well. There really is so much out there. I'm affiliated with a whole bunch of professional speakers whose careers have basically stalled, and most of those folks have been offering free training, free speaking. I know of somebody I talked with earlier this week who normally charges $30,000 per episode, who's doing these free right now. There's even more good stuff out there now than there usually is.
Yeah, there's a ton of it. And just like the access to free information from a learning point of view, it's just everywhere, man. It's everywhere, free or cheap.
All right. The fourth regret that you're hoping people would avoid, you phrase it like this: I should have updated my, whether it's strategy or positioning or business model, for the new reality. And underneath this, is there an assumption that some of the changes that you might make to your business, if you're a listener, would have a permanent place, that even though we don't know what those changes are, you are assuming here that there will be changes that are somewhat permanent that need to be reflected in their business model?
I think so. And again, somewhat permanent. There's a lot of maneuver room in there. But just look at what you and I are doing in our businesses and the conversations we've had over the last few days. Like, we're both like investing heavily in technology so that we can virtualize our services. The stuff that we used to travel to do, we're enjoying spending money, buying technology, and both pretty excited about outfitting our workspaces so that we're able to more effectively do this. I made the decision to do this, and I think I talked about this in a previous episode. I just woke up Monday morning and went, you know what? I'm not getting on a plane this year or next year. So we're going to make assumptions, and I hope I'm wrong. God, I hope I'm wrong.
And your family hopes you're wrong too.
Yeah, everybody hopes I'm wrong. But we're making business decisions on the assumption that that's the way things are going to play out. So that means we've got to change how we deliver some of our stuff's always been online. But the other stuff, we've got to change how we deliver it. So we're making investments that probably we wouldn't make if I thought this was going to be back to normal in a couple of months.
Right.
And I think you're doing the same thing, right?
Yeah. AT&T was out at the property yesterday. They're putting a 2.4 mile fiber optic line dedicated to the house. They are, literally.
I think I'm investing in technology. I buy some stuff, and my wife, who's my business partner, starts like, what did you just buy? And it's like, you should see what David's buying.
It's going to be a live force switch video studio. Yeah, it's going to be nice. It's something I've wanted to do forever, but it just didn't seem like I would use it enough. And now I'm really excited about doing this. I'm past that panic phase as well. Although I find myself panicking for some of the people that I'm speaking with on the phone. And it just is so all over the place. I talked with a firm this morning who's only down about 10%. And then yesterday talked with a firm that's down 80%. So it is just all over the place. But more than just business model, there's strategy, positioning. Are the things that these principals might want to change, were the hints of those in their heads before all this hit? And it's just a matter of validating and acting on it? Or is there just lots more new information that they should take into account? I'm just curious about what it is. Is it new information, or is it more an impetus to make some of the decisions that they kind of thought they should have made earlier?
I think when it comes to fundamental positioning of the agency, like reframing or moving the discipline you're in and or the market you serve, the conversations that we're having with agency owners it's like, I'm not repositioning to get away from my current focused target market because this market is particularly hard hit. I'm thinking about my positioning now because I should have done it years ago. So under the banner of, we've got time now to invest in these things. So that's what I'm seeing of the agency owners who are revisiting their positioning. I wrote strategy / positioning / business model. And to me, strategy is positioning. They're tied to each other. One's kind of an expression of the market viewpoint on your strategy, I guess. But business model is different. Business model, I think more about delivery model, unit economics, like what is it that you're pricing? And I'm seeing a lot of firms who are not changing their disciplines or their markets, but they're changing maybe some adjacencies in their disciplines, doing slightly different things, but delivering them in new and different ways. And to me, that's the really interesting stuff. In this article we're talking about, For Regrets, I also reference the article that you prodded and kicked me to write.
Oh, yeah, the one about constraints.
The game of constraints.
Right.
In this article, I refer back to that one, and that's an article where I say, well, here are 5 or 6 different games that you can play where you reimagine your business operating under this constraint. And those constraint-driven exercises are really valuable in helping you think through different ways in which you might deliver your services.
I really endorse all these 4 for sure. Is there another one that I would add to this? It might be, I see people already thinking about turning the corner again, and I see too many of them wanting to add things back that they stripped away, either expenses or people or services or whatever. They're just reverse peeling the onion, as they're envisioning that this is what they'll do when they have enough interest from clients again, enough money coming in. And I would hope that instead of doing that, they would think about how to rebuild it from scratch and not just rebuild it the way it was before with all the unnecessary stuff. Here's an example of what got me thinking in this direction. So in my country, in the U.S., we have all these federal regulations that build and every year the legislature, when they're in session, they add lots more laws, and they hardly ever look at the unintended consequences of old ones.
It's like Windows 95. It's just code on top of code on top of code, right?
Right. So now they've suspended. I was listening to a podcast yesterday, and something like 260 of those federal regulations have been suspended temporarily. And I'm just sitting here thinking, well, that's really good. Why don't we just keep them suspended? Why do we need them in the first place? Things silly as, can nurses from Canada work in North Dakota or Detroit? Or can you get alcohol delivered to your home? From the ridiculous to the really important.
Oh, yeah. Do you need to be certified to braid hair in Georgia?
And you probably do, right?
Well, there is a state where you need to be certified to braid hair for money. Yeah.
There is, really.
I don't know if it's Georgia. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. More useless information for you listeners. So let's not just rebuild things the way they were. Let's think about how we would do this from scratch, knowing what we know now. How do we create a more nimble organization in the future? And I would want people to not have that regret, I suppose. You didn't really ask me that question. This is a self-interview where I'm asking myself and then I'm answering. I'll let you know when you can talk again.
It was on my list to ask you. I think that's a great point. How often have you played the game, if I had to do it over again? Well, view this as the opportunity to do it over again. You get a chance to a certain extent to rebuild your business. Shannon, our director of coaching, said to me, I think it was the end of last week, she said, okay, I had our 5th client say to me, I am not going back to my space. I'm not either renewing the lease or going back at all. Basically, this is now a distributed agency.
Right.
So that's an opportunity to rethink things on one level. There's so many different levels or aspects on which you can think about doing business differently.
Yeah. This is such a great topic. I really enjoyed interviewing you on this. So thank you for putting some thought into this. When's your next good article going to come out? Is it 2021 or can we expect another one this year?
Yeah, I think I've already written more since the COVID pandemic. You're pretty good at publishing every week, but I've written more in terms of blog posts during the pandemic than I probably did all of last year. I'm working on a massive one. I'm going to break it up into at least 2 pieces. And I've promised this article before. It's the inefficiency principle.
Oh, yeah.
And the reason I didn't write it is I have a whole bunch of notes on it and scribblings on it. And I thought, yeah, maybe it's a book. Maybe it's not. So I've been holding it back. And whether it's a book or not remains to be seen. It probably isn't. But it's a catch-all where I'm going to address 2 topics that I've discussed before in more detail. So this idea of efficiency and innovation being mutually opposable objectives, I'm going to talk about how that principle or problem rears its head in agencies in the first part. In the second part, I'm going to talk about how it rears its head as a series of problems on the client side, particularly when it comes to my good friends in procurement.
Right. Pricing and all that.
Yeah.
Looking forward to it. Thank you, Blair. Good discussion.
Thanks, David. Talk to you next time.
Thank you for listening to Two Bobs with David C. Baker and Blair Enns. Subscribe and learn more at twobobs.com. That's the number 2, BOBS.com.